Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and here it is, the mess up that I did on the Woodgrain soap. So anyway, I did do this twice in two different molds. I had like a shorter mold that I used, and then I had a longer one, but it was the same recipe, so I really don't know, what happened. I think usually when you use maybe reds or whites that have like a good amount of titanium dioxide in them, which, I've run into this in the past. If you have whites that have a good amount of that titanium dioxide in it, it will tend to heat up your batch. I mean, it could speed up your trace as well, but it would, I think, in my experience, it causes more glycerin rivers, which if you don't know what that term is, it basically means that your soap is heated up to where it, like your bars become impregnated with glycerin. That sounds like such a weird word to use, but you'll see in the photos later what I mean by that. But in this particular batch, that is exactly what happened. And even though I used the same colors for the second batch, I didn't get the glycerin rivers in the second batch, but I got I don't know, the colors were muddied, and I just didn't really like it as much. The top of it was really cool, but then like once I cut into it, it just didn't work as well. But anyway, I only used two colors, and I used the soap color itself as the third color. So red is a very, very strong color, so I was trying to measure out just a little bit in this batch to color with red, and I probably used too much red color anyway in this batch, which ultimately it didn't look like it was too much red, but yeah, anyway, so that's that. So here's the white that I'm mixing up, and you can see that it's a good chunk of the batch. I want to say I split up, and I honestly don't remember, but I think I split up the white and the uncolored portion evenly, and then I used like a little bit. I think for this batch, this is a 44-ounce batch. I think I used like, I don't even remember. I want to say 8 ounces, but I think that was for the second batch. I think this was less than that. But it was still, honestly, in my opinion, too much because, like I said, red is a very, very strong color, and my goal was to make it kind of pop more. So with Woodgrain, you do the same technique here, and I was using the uncolored portion and the white portion to create this, split thing. And then for the red, I was just trying to go down the middle there, but I realized when I was pouring it that I just had too much red. So anyway, I'm just doing the typical Woodgrain technique here where, you go back and forth, you tilt your mold up, and then you just go back and forth and make your knots and everything. But at this point, yeah, I realized I had way too much red in there. I mean, it looks cool the further it goes, but yeah, it just, I don't know. I think, if I do try this next time, I just wanted there to be a peak of color. So for the most part, just have the white and the uncolored portion. So the uncolored portion is a little bit more yellowish, so there is a tiny bit of contrast. And my goal was to kind of make it look like the Weirwood trees in Game of Thrones, and they're not perfectly white. I mean, there's, if you know, you know. But anyway, so that was my goal here. And, if you're looking at this mold, it looks pretty cool, I don't know. It does look pretty cool. So I was really kind of disappointed that this particular batch is the one that got the glycerin rivers, because even though it's still a perfectly good bar of soap, when you get those glycerin rivers, the bar itself will melt really fast, just because there's so much of that byproduct just intermingled in it. The bar feels sticky and fat. And yeah, so anyway, but then later on, so with the Weirwood tree, let me just explain why the red is more at the top. I was trying to get it because the Weirwood trees in Game of Thrones have red leaves. So I was trying to get it so that the top of the bar had more red on it than the middle. So that's kind of why, when you're seeing that, more red at the top. That's just kind of what I was going for there. So with this one here, what I did was I used my crock pot method because the mold I used was smaller. I had a lot of excess soap batter, so I put it in my bee and my owl molds. But I think that's also why I got the glycerin rivers, is because usually what I do is I'll put it on low and I'll let it sit in there for a little bit while I kind of gather my dishes and stuff, and then I'll turn it to either warm or just turn it off. And I accidentally left it on low when I was doing my dishes. So if you look, you can see that it was kind of hard for me to, get it out of the mold. It was very pliable. You can even see evidence of overheating on the top. It's kind of wrinkly, which sucks because the top looks pretty cool. But again, anyway, with wood grain soap, you do want to cut this, I don't know how to say it, horizontal. So you're looking at the top and then you flip it to the side, and yeah, I cut that top portion off. I would say all in all, the soap still looked kind of cool, but it just had so many glycerin rivers in it, and it's just not one of those things that I would want to put on my website for sale, just because, knowing what I know about glycerin rivers, I just know that they just melt really fast and wouldn't be worth it. But it was kind of cool in that little piece there that I was kind of wiggling back and forth earlier. You could see through it because it had so much of that glycerin in it. So anyway, ultimately, I mean, they still look cool, but they just didn't really turn out the way I had hoped they would. So I decided to try again. And like I said earlier, I did use the same recipe. I'm using the same colors, except this time I decided to add a mica shimmer in there, and I'm using this French white shimmer, which it's different than the white champagne, because white champagne, again, is more titanium dioxide based. This white shimmer, it's so hard for the camera to catch it. It's really cool looking. It almost looks like glitter, but ultimately, I mean, and you'll see in the end there, but it looks best on the top than within the soap. But either way, I think the inside of the soap doesn't match up what I had hoped for it either. So this time around, I'm using my longer mold as well. So even though I said before use less red, since this recipe is a little bit larger, I did have to compensate for that a little bit anyway. So I am using a little bit more red batter in this one, but that's just because the recipe itself is larger. So I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say is that I'm still using less red in the long run than I did on the first one, but it doesn't really matter because I feel like this one turned out more like my candy cane soap than the wood grain that I was looking for. But yeah, I'll let this play so you can see what I'm talking about. And just so you know, I'm doing the same thing here where I did an uncolored portion and a white portion to create that, I guess, not dirty look, but just not that uniform white look on the Weirwood tree. So I think in the end of this too, I mean, and you'll see it at the end, I don't really think the uncolored portion showed very well. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because the red was so overwhelming that it kind of took over that color or what, but yeah, you'll see it in the end. But clearly I have a good portion of it here, and I just pour it the same way down the sides. Maybe I mixed it too much. I don't know. It was very fluid. And I also did something a little different here. So this is something that you would do for maybe an in the pot swirl, where you would raise up the pitcher really high and let it drop really low. So instead of going straight down the center like I did with my other one. So I did change a couple variables. I probably shouldn't have done that, but it is what it is. And the soap smells good. It just, isn't my ideal look, I guess. But again, you know, I'm thinking about maybe putting it on as an Ugly Betty soap on the website. If not, it'll probably just be like a home soap. But I'm putting that mica oil swirl in there, and it didn't, you know, with the French white shimmer, it didn't show up very well in the center of the bars, so the top layers look good, but since these are cut horizontally, you're really only getting it on the top, so the inside of the soap doesn't really show it very well. And I think at this point I was kind of giving up because I was just like, man, this just looks so muddy and I just don't even care anymore. So I was just like pouring it in there, just resorting to, you know, this is just going to be, you know, not my best work, but yeah, so that's that. And I had a lot of red relative to the rest, and even though I used less this time, I don't know, maybe I need to have like a lighter hand with it, I guess. So where the first batch I had more of the red in the front, this one it was just kind of all over the place. But you know, at the time it's interesting because at the time when I was doing this, you don't see the things that you see unless you're looking back on it on video. And so me looking at it now, I'm just like, yeah, I could have done this, I could have done that. This was a little bit, you know, I mean, there are certain aspects that you can understand, like my soap batter was a little too fluid at first, you know, I knew right away that I had too much red, you know, stuff like that. But really, you know, when it comes to like the in the pot swirl type technique, which I didn't mean to do, but it just kind of came out that way. These are the kinds of things that happens when you're watching it. But I will say that, oh, and then just so you know, this one I used the different method of heating because it was my longer mold, so it didn't fit in my crock pot. So anyway, that's that. And you know, top down, it looks kind of cool in my opinion, but the cut isn't quite as cool. What I was gonna say earlier is that when you make soap, it's just you're on a timer, so sometimes, like, depending on your state of mood or, you know, whatever, I don't know, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like basically if you're not in the right state of mind when you're doing this, sometimes you kind of rush it and you just want to get it, you know, done so it doesn't turn into soap on a stick, which I think in my history, you know, I've accidentally had so many soap on a stick incidences that I'm a little, you know, gun shy, so to speak. So a lot of times, I don't know, I feel like maybe I rush a little bit too fast sometimes, because there are benefits to having thicker soap when you're, you know, making some of these designs. This one in particular, you know, my soap was pretty fluid, but it probably could have been a little bit thicker to make the lines stick out a little bit more. And I think that's kind of where I went wrong with this, in addition to in the pot swirl kind of technique. But if you make soap, you know what I'm kind of talking about. You know, it's just the second you add the lye, if you have fragrance, you don't know how things are going to behave. Even if you have the most perfectly behaved recipe, you're not guaranteed, like with the fragrance oil, for it to come out or to, you know, behave basically. So some of the pieces are kind of cool, but you know, for the most part, I think they just looked really muddy. And like with the other one, maybe I'll put these on for like an Ugly Betty soap, but I haven't decided yet because we are running low on soap in the house, and so maybe I'll just use it at home. And here's the final result. So you can see that the first one looks pretty cool, but there's transparent areas that you can see. That's where the glycerin rivers kind of are. So when you have a really transparent soap like this, it's just, yeah, it's going to be sticky. It's going to melt really fast. You know, some transparent soaps are done like that on purpose, but they're done in such a way that they don't melt that fast and stuff. But yeah, this one will. But here's the second one, and it's lighter. The picture doesn't do it justice because that shimmer through there is actually pretty neat. But anyway, so this is my failed soap. And if you didn't know already, I do have a site where I sell the miscellaneous soaps that I make. It's linked in the description below, so feel free to check it out. I'd love to see you over there. And I have 2 newsletters also linked in the description, one for books, one for soap. So thank you for joining me on this little ride here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.